Tonight, before you eat, you'll probably wash your hands without even thinking about it. It's automatic. It's obvious. But less than 200 years ago, one doctor lost his career, his reputation, and eventually his mind trying to convince the medical world of that exact same idea. His name was Ignaz Semmelweis. In 1846, he was a young obstetrician working in a Vienna hospital with 2 maternity wards. Both delivered babies. Both used similar methods. But one ward had a death rate nearly 3 times higher than the other, and nobody could explain why. Mothers were dying of something called childbed fever, a violent infection that could kill within days of giving birth. Women were so terrified of the high death rate ward that some begged to give birth in the street instead. Semmelweis started digging for a pattern. What was different between the 2 wards? The answer came from tragedy. A colleague of his, a doctor named Jakub Kolečka, cut his finger during an autopsy and died shortly after, with symptoms eerily similar to childbed fever. Semmelweis had his breakthrough. Doctors in the deadlier ward were performing autopsies in the morning, then walking straight to deliver babies without washing their hands in between. They were carrying something invisible from the dead to the living. So Semmelweis ordered a simple change. Doctors had to wash their hands in a chlorinated solution before touching any patient. The results were almost immediate. Death rates in that ward dropped by more than 90% within months. By any modern standard, this should have been celebrated as one of the greatest medical discoveries of the century. Instead, it was rejected. This was decades before germ theory existed. Scientists like Louis Pasteur hadn't yet proven that invisible organisms could cause disease, so Semmelweis had no accepted explanation for why his method worked, only the evidence that it did. And that made established doctors furious. Admitting he was right meant admitting that they themselves had been killing their patients with their own unwashed hands. The medical establishment turned on him. He was mocked, isolated, and eventually forced out of his position in Vienna. Historian Sherwin Nuland, who studied Semmelweis extensively, described how the sheer psychological weight of being dismissed by his peers slowly wore the man down. He grew erratic. He wrote furious, increasingly desperate letters accusing other doctors of being murderers. In 1865, he was committed to an asylum where he died just weeks later, ironically from an infected wound, the very thing he had spent his career trying to prevent. It would take years after his death for germ theory to finally prove him right. Only then did handwashing become standard medical practice, saving what researchers now estimate to be millions of lives. So tonight, when you turn on the tap without a second thought, remember that this tiny, automatic habit was once a battle. One man fought completely alone against an entire profession that refused to believe him until it was too late for him to see himself proven right.